We'd been dreaming of this camping trip since the first frost of winter settled over our city. A desperate escape from the relentless cacophony of honking cars, crowded streets, and the endless barrage of work emails that seemed to multiply like weeds. The group me, Morgan, Mark, Autumn, and Ben had been inseparable since our college days, bonded by late-night study sessions and shared dreams of adventure. Now, years later, we craved a weekend to reconnect with nature and each other, to trade the concrete jungle for the untamed wild. We arrived at our chosen spot early in the day, a remote clearing deep within a forest whose name I'll withhold, not out of secrecy, but because its memory still tightens my chest. Unloading our gear from the car, the weight of our backpacks a comforting promise of self-sufficiency, we started hiking, the forest swallowing us whole. A maze of trees stretched endlessly, their leaves weaving a canopy overhead that filtered sunlight into dappled patterns on the ground, painting the earth in shifting mosaics of light and shadow. The air was clean, sharp with the scent of damp soil and growing things, each breath a reminder of the world we'd left behind. Every step we took on the forest floor felt cushioned, the earth yielding softly under our hiking boots, a gentle embrace from the wilderness. But as we moved deeper, the trail became less defined, the path narrowing until it was little more than a suggestion, a faint scar on the forest's skin. Mark, leading our line with the confidence of a seasoned hiker, suddenly stopped, his hand raised in a silent signal. "Look at that. Do you see it?" he asked, pointing ahead. We squinted in the direction of his gaze, our eyes adjusting to the dim light, and there, nestled between the trees, almost as if hiding, was something that seized our collective attention. It was a cabin, its wood weathered to a ghostly gray, aged by decades of neglect, yet still standing defiant against the forest's slow reclamation. The windows were cracked and smeared with grime, their glass opaque, making it impossible to see inside, while the door hung slightly ajar, swaying gently in the wind as if beckoning us closer. Vines crawled up its sides like skeletal fingers, and leaves piled high against its foundation, a testament to years of abandonment. As we approached, the wood creaked under our weight, the porch groaning with each step, its planks sagging as if unaccustomed to visitors. Morgan, ever the boldest among us, pushed the door open, her hands steady despite the resistance. The door stuck at first, as if reluctant to yield its secrets, but finally gave way with a deep, mournful groan that echoed through the stillness. We stepped inside cautiously, our eyes struggling to adjust to the dim light filtering through the filthy windows, the air inside thick with the musty scent of decay and time. The cabin was a single large room, its furniture old and worn, frozen in a moment long past. A table stood in the center, surrounded by chairs whose upholstery had rotted to threads, their legs wobbling under invisible weight. On one wall, a fireplace gaped, filled with ash that hadn't been disturbed in years, a cold monument to forgotten warmth. Scattered belongings littered the space, a rusty lantern on a shelf, its glass cracked, a chipped mug on the table, its handle broken, an old blanket folded neatly on a wooden chest, its edges frayed but untouched by dust, as if placed there recently. Ben's gaze fixated on a worn journal resting on the table, its cover faded and tattered, the leather cracked with age. The table itself was a makeshift affair, planks of wood supported by stacked cinder blocks, a testament to the cabin's utilitarian past. He picked it up, the pages yellowed and brittle, the ink smudged in places but still legible, and opened it with a reverence that belied his usual skepticism. "It says here that there's a creature in the forest, roams around at night or something," he read aloud, his voice steady but tinged with curiosity. The writer even made sketches. He turned the journal to show us, revealing rudimentary drawings of a figure with elongated limbs and sharp, jagged features, its form both humanoid and monstrous, its eyes rendered as hollow voids. Morgan, standing near a window, rolled her eyes, her reflection distorted in the cracked glass. "It's probably a joke or someone with an overactive imagination," she said, her tone dismissive. "People hear a raccoon rustling in the trash and think it's a monster." I nodded, leaning against a wooden post that supported the sagging ceiling, its surface rough under my hand. "Yeah, I agree with Morgan, I chimed in. The forest is full of sounds, especially at night. Owls hoot, deer rustle through the brush. The wind makes the trees groan. Any of that can be creepy if you're not used to it. We shouldn't let some random journal dictate how we enjoy our trip. Mark, who had been poking around a rusty metal cabinet in the corner, its hinges squeaking with protest, joined the conversation. But don't you think it's at least worth considering? He asked, his voice quieter than usual. Autumn, perched on one of the creaky chairs near the table, shrugged, her fingers tracing the grain of the wood. Maybe it's some kind of local lore or someone's attempt at storytelling. Who knows? But we can't deny it adds a layer of mystery to our trip. Ben closed the journal, placing it back on the table with a soft thud, and looked at each of us, his expression unreadable. Mystery or not, it's getting late. We should head back to camp before it gets dark. We left the cabin, the door creaking shut behind us, and made our way back through the forest, following the trail of broken twigs and footprints we'd left earlier, the markers a reassuring guide in the fading light. But as we walked, the journal's words lingered in my mind, a nagging whisper I couldn't shake despite my earlier dismissal. The unknown story behind those handwritten pages clung to me like a shadow, its weight heavier with each step. For now, though, our goal was to return to our tents, start a fire, and focus on the trip we'd all been anticipating for months. We reached our campsite as the sun dipped below the horizon, the clearing a small island of order amidst the forest's chaos. Morgan, with her years of outdoor experience, took charge of setting up the campfire, arranging logs in a pyramid shape with the precision of a ritual, lighting the kindling beneath with a flick of her lighter. Within minutes, a fire crackled to life, its warmth a balm against the cooling air of the evening. We gathered around it, the heat seeping into our bones, skewers in hand as we roasted sausages and corn over the open flames, the scent of cooking meat blending with the smoky aroma of burning wood, filling the campsite with a comforting familiarity. Ben produced a bag of marshmallows, his grin wide as he suggested s'mores later, and we all nodded eagerly, the promise of sweetness a small joy to cling to. As the sky shifted from twilight to darkness, the stars emerging like pinpricks of light above us, Mark decided it was the perfect time for storytelling, clearing his throat with a dramatic flair. So, there was this one time when his story was cut short by an unsettling noise, a low, deep growl that seemed to rise from the distance, yet made us all turn toward the forest edge in unison. The firelight cast moving shadows on the trees, their branches twisting into sinister shapes, making it impossible to see anything clearly beyond the circle of light. What was that? Autumn's voice wavered, her eyes wide with a mix of curiosity and concern, reflecting the flickering flames. Probably just an animal, Ben offered hesitantly, peering into the darkness as if expecting something to emerge, his hand tightening on his skewer. Morgan, gripping her skewer like a weapon, questioned, "Animals like what? Bears? Wolves?" Her tone betrayed her unease, the possibilities no longer abstract. I attempted to calm the atmosphere, my voice steadier than I felt. "Look, we're all together, and we have a fire going. Most wild animals are wary of humans and especially fires." But as the words left my mouth, I realized I was also trying to convince myself, my eyes meeting Morgan's, her expression mirroring my own doubt. The evening continued, but the mood had shifted irrevocably. Where there had once been laughter and easy conversation, there was now a palpable unease, a tension that tightened with each odd noise piercing the air. Snarls, distant howls, rustling that didn't fit the pattern of wind through leaves. Each sound made us glance nervously at each other, silently confirming we'd all heard it, our earlier skepticism eroding under the weight of the unknown. My concern escalated with each unfamiliar noise, the forest's symphony turning sinister. Finally, unable to dismiss my growing worry, I broke the silence. "Okay, look, let's throw some extra logs on the fire to make it burn brighter. And maybe we should all stick close to the tents tonight, just to be safe." I picked up a few thick logs from our woodpile, their bark rough against my palms, and placed them onto the fire, the flames rising higher, casting a broader circle of light around the campsite. a fragile barrier against the dark. Everyone nodded in agreement, the unspoken consensus clear: better safe than sorry. One by one, Morgan, Mark, and Ben zipped themselves into their tents, the sound of the zippers cutting through the night air like a blade. Each click a small act of retreat. Autumn remained outside with me, both of us staring into the fire as if it held answers to the questions we dared not voice. The flames flickered and danced, their light playing on her face, highlighting the worry etched into her features. "You're concerned too, aren't you?" she finally asked, her voice softer than usual, barely audible over the fire's crackle. "Yeah?" I admitted, stirring the fire with a stick to keep it burning strong, the embers glowing like tiny stars. She looked at me with serious eyes, her gaze steady. "We probably should have paid more attention to what that journal said." I nodded, the weight of regret settling in my chest. "I was thinking the same thing. Let's agree to stay alert for the rest of the night. Maybe we can even set up some shifts to keep watch." "I'll take the first one." Autumn's face showed a mixture of relief and resolve as she nodded. "Sounds like a plan," she said, standing to head to her tent but pausing to look back. "Let's hope it's just our imaginations running wild." I nodded, but as she disappeared into her tent, leaving me alone by the fire, the forest around us growing increasingly dark and silent, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. I sat close to the fire, stoking it to keep the flames alive and bright, the wood crackling and popping in a comforting rhythm that contrasted sharply with the unsettling noises we'd heard earlier. I strained my ears, trying to pick up any sound that seemed out of place, my body tense with anticipation. An hour passed without incident, and just as I began to relax, thinking perhaps we'd overreacted, another low growl reverberated through the forest, distant but distinct, sending a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. I decided it was time to wake Autumn for her shift, gently unzipping her tent to find her already awake, lying in her sleeping bag with her eyes open, staring at the fabric ceiling. "I couldn't really sleep," she confessed, her voice small. "Your turn," I told her, handing her the large flashlight we'd brought along, its weight a small reassurance. She took it, nodded, and stepped out to sit by the fire as I retreated to my tent, the canvas walls offering little comfort. Lying there, staring at the fabric ceiling, the thought that we might not be alone kept me alert, my mind racing through scenarios. Bears, wolves, something worse. Eventually, fatigue took over, and I drifted into a shallow sleep, my dreams blurring with reality, filled with shadows and growls. I was jolted awake by a sudden shout. "Hey, everyone, wake up!" It was Autumn's voice, tinged with urgency, cutting through the haze of sleep. I scrambled out of my sleeping bag, unzipped my tent, and joined the others gathering around the fire, their faces pale in the flickering light. "I saw something moving between the trees," Autumn said, pointing with the flashlight into the dense foliage beyond our campsite, the beam trembling in her hand. "It was too big to be a small animal." Mark, ever the skeptic, squinted into the darkness, his brow furrowed. "Are you sure it wasn't just a shadow? These trees can play tricks on your eyes, especially at night." Despite his words, he kept a firm grip on a sturdy branch he'd picked up as an improvised weapon, his knuckles white. We spent the rest of the night in a heightened state of alertness, our conversation subdued, our eyes frequently scanning the dark perimeter of our campsite. The fire became the center of our world, its light a barrier we hoped would keep any lurking dangers at bay. But the growls and rustles persisted, a constant reminder of the threat beyond. We were up with the first rays of sunlight, far earlier than any of us had planned, the night's events still fresh in our minds, a heavy weight that refused to lift. I unzipped my tent and stepped into the cold morning air, the forest eerily silent, the dawn light casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward us. My eyes met Mark's and Autumn's, both standing beside their tents with looks of disbelief etched into their faces. "What's happening?" I asked, walking over, my boots crunching on the dew-kissed ground. "Check this out," Mark said, his finger pointing to a series of deep claw marks that had torn through the fabric of his tent, the slashes jagged and precise, as if made by something with purpose. Autumn gestured to her tent, which bore the same ominous markings, the canvas shredded in a pattern that spoke of violence. "What could have done this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "We need to leave now," I said, my heart racing, the reality of our situation crashing over me like a wave. Our focus turned to immediate safety. The car was parked half a mile away, and getting there became our top priority. We grabbed our backpacks, hastily stuffing them with essentials: food, water, first aid kits, maps, leaving behind non-essentials like camping chairs and extra clothes, prioritizing speed over comfort. The forest now felt like a maze of potential dangers, every sound and movement putting us on high alert, our senses sharpened by fear. We took the most direct route based on Mark's GPS, though it meant navigating through rough terrain, pushing through thickets that clawed at our clothes, jumping over fallen logs slick with moss, crossing a small stream whose icy water soaked our boots. Every so often, one of us glanced back, half expecting to see something lurking behind us, the claw marks on our tents a stark reminder that we were not alone. Finally, the spot where we parked the car came into view, a silver beacon of hope amidst the green, but the relief was short-lived. Ben inserted the key into the ignition and turned it. Nothing happened, the engine silent, not even a sputter. "You've got to be kidding me," Ben said, slamming his palm onto the steering wheel, the frustration palpable. "Could you have left the lights on or drained the battery somehow?" Morgan asked, her voice laced with concern and a flicker of hope that this was a simple oversight. "Absolutely not. I double-checked everything before we left the car," Ben asserted, his tone firm. He stepped out and lifted the hood, the hinges creaking, and a moment later let out a gasp that drew us closer. "You've got to see this," he said, his voice tight. The wires under the hood were a mess, chewed through and frayed, as if something had deliberately sabotaged us. Mark took a look, his face going pale, the color draining as if he'd seen a ghost. "This is unreal," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "It's like something deliberately sabotaged us." The realization hit us like a physical blow. We were definitely not alone, and we were not safe here. "That's it," I announced, looking at my friends' anxious faces, their eyes wide with the same dread I felt. "We need a new plan fast." "Okay, so what's our next move?" Autumn asked, her voice searching for answers, her hands trembling as she clutched her backpack. "The nearest ranger station is about 4 miles away," I said, unfolding the map I'd stuffed into my bag earlier, its creases worn from use. "It's our best chance for help, and it's reachable on foot. We don't have any other options, do we?" Morgan's eyes met mine, her expression resolute. "No, we don't," she confirmed, her voice steady despite the fear in her gaze. I folded the map and put it back, the paper crinkling in the silence. "We need to move quickly, and we should stick together. Let's go." Our footsteps crunched over the forest floor as we set out, the ground beneath us uneven, a mix of rocks and roots that threatened to trip us with every step. We navigated over jagged stones, pushed through thickets of underbrush that tugged at our clothes, the thorns snagging like tiny claws. I noticed we were all frequently looking over our shoulders, the unmistakable feeling of being watched pressing down on us, a weight that grew heavier with each passing moment. Time stretched on, each minute feeling like an hour, the forest sounds that would normally go unnoticed, now amplifying our fear. A twig snapping, leaves rustling in a faint breeze. Every noise made our hearts race, our breaths shallow. Autumn broke the silence, her voice so soft it was almost drowned out by our hurried steps. "We should have never ignored that journal," she said, the regret heavy in her tone, her eyes fixed on the ground. Morgan, a few steps ahead, turned her head slightly to acknowledge her comment. "You're right, we should have taken it seriously. But we didn't. And all we can do now is get to that ranger station as quickly as possible." We lapsed back into silence, our minds racing with thoughts of what might be lurking around us, the weight of our situation settling like a thick blanket, suffocating in its intensity. Our eyes scanned the area constantly, searching for any sign of movement, any indication that we weren't imagining things. Then, just as a sliver of doubt began to creep in. When I started to think maybe we were letting our imaginations run wild, we heard it. A low growl rumbled through the air, echoing faintly between the trees, too intentional to dismiss as just another forest sound. The truly unsettling part was that it happened in the middle of the day, dispelling any hope that our unknown stalker was a creature of the night. We stopped in our tracks, eyes meeting in a shared moment of realization, the air thick with tension, our earlier skepticism replaced by a unanimous sense of dread. Morgan was the first to speak, her voice edged with gravity. "All right, let's pick up the pace. We're not safe, and the sooner we get to that ranger station, the better." With that, we continued our journey, our pace as brisk as the rough terrain allowed, but every sound filtering through the trees now carried a note of menace, quickening our steps, fueling the dread that hung over us like a dark cloud. Our hearts pounded in our chests, each step filled with the urgency fear provided, every crunch of leaves, every snap of a twig setting our nerves on edge. It was as if the forest itself conspired against us, its shadows lengthening, its silence growing more oppressive. We were a united group, a team bound by the immediate need for safety. Yet there was no mistaking the palpable sense of vulnerability that enveloped us. Our gazes shifted constantly, darting to and fro as we scanned our surroundings for any sign of the creature, our minds racing almost as fast as our feet, the feeling that we were running out of time intensifying with each second. We were in a race, not just against time, but against an unknown creature lurking somewhere in the forest, against the dread that had settled deep into the pit of our stomachs, a cold, gnawing terror that refused to relent. A sense of relief flooded over us as we finally caught sight of our destination. The ranger station stood before us, a simple wooden structure that had never looked so inviting, an oasis in the desert of our fear. Our steps became faster, almost desperate, as we closed the distance, the station a beacon guiding us toward what we hoped was sanctuary. There was no room for doubt or hesitation now. We'd come too far, endured too much to let anything stop us. All that mattered was getting inside, locking the door, and alerting the authorities to our situation. As we approached, the ranger station came into clearer focus, its modest form a stark contrast to the wild around it. A small porch held 2 rocking chairs, their wood weathered but sturdy, presumably for rangers to enjoy a moment's rest. The windows had curtains, currently closed, adding a homey touch to what was essentially a functional outpost in the wilderness. A flagpole stood to one side, the American flag hanging limply in the still air, a silent sentinel. The front door was solid wood with a pane of glass at the top, revealing a dark interior beyond. To the side, a bulletin board was filled with notices, maps, safety information for hikers, beside a metal rack holding brochures about local plants, wildlife, and hiking tips. The ground beneath us was a mix of dirt and gravel, crunching under our feet as we closed the final yards to the building. I noticed a radio antenna protruding from the roof, a lifeline to the outside world. Though the building itself showed its age, the paint chipped, the wood weathered. Above the door, a wooden sign displayed the words Ranger Station, in carved letters painted forest green, with smaller letters announcing the park's name beneath. We reached the porch, each of us pausing to catch our breath, standing in a small group, glancing back the way we came one final time. There was no sign of the creature, but that provided little comfort. We'd learned the hard way that just because you couldn't see danger didn't mean it wasn't there. Ben stepped forward, grasping the door handle with a quick look back at us, as if to confirm we were ready for whatever came next. He turned it and pushed the door open, the hinges creaking, and we entered, our eyes sweeping the room for people. But the station was empty, the silence within as oppressive as the forests. "You've got to be kidding me," Mark said in frustration, his voice echoing off the wooden walls. I spotted a wooden chair near the left wall and quickly dragged it to the door, jamming the chairs back under the knob to secure the entrance as best I could. "Search for anything useful," I directed, my voice tight with urgency. Ben dashed to a phone on a desk, picking up the receiver and pressing it to his ear, only to set it back down with a defeated look. "It's dead," he announced, the words a heavy blow. Autumn rummaged through desk drawers on the opposite side of the room, her hands grasping a radio, which she hoisted out and placed on the desk next to the useless phone. "What about this? Think it works?" she asked, her voice hopeful. Morgan stepped closer, inspecting the radio, her expression turning to cautious optimism. "We've got to try," she asserted. We huddled around the desk, eyes locked on Autumn as she turned the knobs, maneuvering through a storm of static noise. My hands clenched, silently willing the device to connect us with someone, anyone, who could help. At last, the static gave way to a faint human voice, a lifeline in the chaos. "Hello? Can anyone hear me?" I asked, my voice tinged with desperation as I leaned into the microphone. After a moment, a reply crackled through. "Yes, we hear you. Who is this?" "We're a group of campers and we're stuck in a ranger station. We need immediate assistance," I said, my voice firm but anxious, the words spilling out in a rush. The response was not what we wanted to hear. "We won't be able to get to you until morning. Can you hold out?" I swallowed hard, the reality sinking in. "We have no choice," I answered, cutting the connection, the static resuming like a death knell. Switching to action, Mark dug through a storage closet near the corner of the room, emerging after a minute with a red box. "This is all I could find," he said, revealing a collection of flares inside, their bright red casings a stark contrast to the dim room. Morgan grabbed one, turning it over in her hands, inspecting it carefully. "Better than nothing," she concluded, her voice steady but her eyes betraying her fear. Night wrapped the ranger station in an inky shroud, the darkness outside pressing against the windows like a living thing. We used chairs, tables, and whatever else was at hand to create a makeshift barricade near the door and windows, our movements frantic but purposeful, the wood scraping against the floor. We were silent, our eyes meeting only to exchange nervous glances, the walls themselves seeming to close in, the air thick with tension. Then, a guttural noise cut through the silence, a low growl that chilled us to the core, reverberating through the room, a sound that was both distant and far too close. "There it is," Autumn whispered, her voice tinged with dread, her hands trembling as she clutched her flare. We tightened our grips on the flares, our improvised weapons, our hearts pounding, our ears straining for additional sounds. Suddenly, a thunderous bang shook the door, the chair I'd wedged under the knob vibrating violently but holding, the wood groaning under the pressure. The room filled with the acrid scent of sweat and fear, our breaths shallow, our bodies tense. The growl came again, louder, more menacing, followed by another bang, the door frame creaking and splintering, the sound of physical assault. I could see in my friend's eyes that we'd reached a tipping point, we needed to act. "On my count, light the flares," I commanded, my voice steady despite the rising panic. 1, 2, 3. In unison, we struck the flares to life, the room instantly bathed in a pulsating red glow, the light casting eerie shadows on the walls. We rushed toward the door, our flares held high like torches, pushing as one to force it open. There it was, the creature. It stood tall on two legs, its posture hunched, its skin a mottled mix of grays and browns, resembling the texture of bark, blending seamlessly with the forest beyond. Its limbs were long and gnarled, ending in claw-like hands that gleamed with a dull menace, its form both alien and disturbingly familiar. The face was the most jarring. Deep-set eyes glinted with hostile intelligence, a predatory cunning that sent a shiver through me, and its mouth was wide, filled with irregular, jagged teeth capable of inflicting serious damage. Despite its monstrous features, the unsettling part was its vaguely human-like appearance, as if it were a twisted version of a person, a nightmare given form. It let out a hiss, an unsettling sound that reverberated through the room, its eyes narrowing in what could only be disdain. The creature recoiled from the intense light of the flares, taking a step back, seeming to reconsider its next move. We held our flares out in front of us, forming a line of defense, our breaths ragged, our bodies trembling but resolute. It hesitated, eyeing each of us as if calculating the risks, time hanging in the balance. Finally, it turned slowly, retreating into the dark veil of the night, its growls fading into the distance. But even as it disappeared, we knew it was still out there, lurking, keeping us on edge. We let out a collective sigh of relief, but it was a short-lived victory. The immediate threat was gone, but the long night stretched ahead, and we were not out of danger. Seizing the moment, Morgan lunged forward, thrusting her flare toward where the creature had stood, eliciting a guttural cry that echoed through the room. Without wasting another second, I kicked the door shut, repositioning the chair under the knob, the room filling with a tense silence punctuated by our heavy breathing. "Okay, we've got it back outside," I said, my voice steady but strained. "But we need to keep these flares handy." Ben took charge of the radio again, attempting to get a stronger signal, his fingers deft but his expression frustrated. After several minutes of static, he sighed and set it down. "It's just not working well enough," he admitted, his shoulders slumping. Autumn suggested we set up a schedule to keep watch. "We should have 2 people awake at all times," she said, her voice firm despite the exhaustion in her eyes. We agreed, quickly deciding on shifts. Mark and Morgan took the first watch, while the rest of us tried to rest on the hard floor, the wooden planks cold against our backs. Sleep was elusive, every sound from outside jolting me awake, my hand instinctively reaching for the nearby flare, its casing a comforting weight. During my watch with Autumn, we heard it again. A scratchy, shuffling noise from the side of the building, growing louder, culminating in a sudden thump against one of the windows. We readied our flares, our eyes meeting in silent agreement that we were prepared to use them if necessary, our bodies tense with anticipation. The window held, but the sound persisted, a testing probe. "What is it doing?" Autumn whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's testing us. Testing the building, looking for weaknesses," I replied, my voice tinged with grim realization. The night dragged on, each hour stretching longer than the last, each shift punctuated by the creature's intermittent attempts to breach our sanctuary. It never came as close as that first encounter, but its presence lingered, marked by occasional growls and movements in the darkness, a constant reminder of the threat outside. Finally, the first rays of morning light filtered through the windows, casting a soft glow over the room, our faces drawn but relieved. It wasn't over, but we'd made it through the night, a small victory in the face of terror. The sound of helicopter blades grew louder, punctuating the quiet of the early morning. Our eyes meeting as relief washed over us like a tidal wave, the tension that had held us captive dissipating. "It's finally over," Mark whispered, encapsulating what we all felt. As the helicopter touched down near the ranger station, a team of rescuers rushed toward us, their professional demeanor a stark contrast to our haggard appearance. They scanned the barricaded building, their expressions puzzled. "You folks okay?" one asked, helping us into the helicopter, his voice steady but curious. We nodded, too emotionally drained for words, our bodies heavy with exhaustion. During the flight, we shared our story with the rescue team, their faces a mix of skepticism and concern as they listened intently. "We've been covering this area for years," one rescuer said, "and we've never heard of anything remotely like this. We'll make sure the area is thoroughly searched." Another added, "You did the right thing by calling for help." As we ascended, I caught a final glimpse of the ranger station below, its small form dwarfed by the forest, a silent witness to our nightmare. The helicopter took us to a nearby medical facility for a checkup, the medical staff kind but asking questions we found difficult to answer. How do you explain a creature that defies logic? A night that felt like a descent into madness? We were physically okay, but mentally, the night's events had left scars that would take time to heal, invisible wounds that ached with every memory. While waiting for clearance to leave, one of the rescuers updated us. "We're conducting a full sweep of the area," he informed us. "Nothing yet, but we're not taking any chances." He handed us a set of keys, the metal cold in my hand. "Your car has been retrieved. It's in the parking lot, repaired enough to get you home." We thanked him, the magnitude of our ordeal making every small kindness feel like a lifeline. After final paperwork, we were released, walking to the car, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken thoughts. The engine started, and I felt myself release a breath I hadn't known I was holding. The sound a small victory. As we drove away, the lingering question haunted us, one too terrifying to fully contemplate. What was that creature? And were there more like it lurking in the depths of the wilderness? The rescue team might never find anything, but the uncertainty remained, chilling us to our core, a shadow that followed us long after the forest faded from view.